And now we will hear from Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your determined advocacy for Indian country and the leadership of this committee. I thank you for having this very important hearing today on several pieces of legislation, but specifically the Spokane Tribe and having the Department of Interior on S 1345 legislation to provide compensation to the Spokane Tribe for the building of a federal dam on their land 70 years ago and the continued impacts of that today. The Coulee Dam project destroyed tribal schools, roads, sacred sites, and salmon runs critical to the tribe's livelihood and culture. This legislation fulfills the federal government's moral and equitable obligation to treat the Spokane Tribe honorably and fairly by finally settling their claims and providing the tribe with just and equitable compensation. However, these benefits had come at a direct cost to tribal property that have, Let me begin by welcoming the Chairman, Greg Abrahamson, who's going to be on one of the panels that we have today. He's traveled over 2,000 miles to be here from Washington State, and I thank you for doing that. He has testified in the past on similar legislation to S 1345, and today he's going to be making comments about changes to this legislation since the last Congress. For more than half a century, the Columbia Basin Project has made incredible contributions to our nation. It has helped pull the economy out of the Great Depression. It provided electricity, that provided aluminum to build airplanes and many other things. The project continues today to produce enormous revenues, and it is a key component of the agricultural economy in eastern Washington, helping to irrigate over 600,000 acres of land and provide about 11% of the electricity needed by various towns across various areas of our state in the Pacific Northwest. However, these benefits come at a great direct cost to tribal property that have been inundated when the U.S. government built the Coulee Dam. And before dam construction, the free flow of the Columbia supported a robust and plentiful salmon run that provided virtually all of the subsistence of the Spokane Tribe. After construction, the Columbia and its Spokane River tributary flooded the tribal communities and sacred schools and roads, and to this day, the effect of the flooding are still being felt by the Spokane Tribe. To date, the tribe has received only $4,700 for the damages that have been done. By comparison, the Colville, whose reservation lies just to the west of the Spokane Tribe Reservation, received well over $53 million for its losses it suffered and continues to suffer as the result of the Columbia Basin Project. It is an injustice that the Spokane Tribe has not received fair and equitable compensation for suffering from similar damage, and this legislation would fulfill our obligations to the Spokane Tribe. Getting to this point today has been a long and evolving process, but I believe the language in this legislation addresses any concerns the Department of Interior has previously raised, and I'll look forward to hearing their testimony today. We've also made some key changes to the legislation to satisfy the concerns of the Bureau of Reclamation expressed during the last hearing on this legislation and in correspondence to the committee in 2008. The Spokane Tribe spent several months this year working with the Bureau of Reclamation to address their concerns and with the overall settlement agreement. So I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing this to be on the agenda today and for the Spokane Tribe coming here today to talk about this legislation. I know that there will be many people working on this legislation within the Northwest delegation, and so I just look forward to working with my House and other Senate colleagues, Senator Murray and other House colleagues on this legislation. I want to say that I've received letters from letters from different local counties, the governor, the mayor of Spokane, and many others in support of this legislation. So I'll look forward to hearing today's testimony.
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Labrador, if you could tell me about the, are you speaking on behalf of the entire Interior Department? I mean, is the Bureau of Reclamation satisfied with this legislation since they're the ones who had issues or concerns and actually run Lake Roosevelt from a reservoir perspective?
Senator Cantwell, I am speaking on behalf of the department, and reclamation's concerns are partially included in the written statement that we provided, which was fairly short.
So even though we've heard from the Bureau of Rec that they don't have any concerns, you're now saying they do?
Actually, the underlying there were two underlying issues submitted in the formal written statement. One was some law enforcement provisions that we thought could be taken care of better outside of some of the underlying acts that created Grand Coulee Dam or authorized it. In specific law enforcement, we thought that the Secretary could simply delegate the law enforcement authority that the Spokane Tribe is seeking, rather than in this legislation where there's a number of other non-law enforcement delegations that could be provided under that. And the second was that this was titled a settlement act from claims, and that from the department's perspective, it's more of an equitable compensation because of the long history dealing with the Indian Claims Commission Act and the fact that Colville was able to amend its underlying claim to include the hydropower value and the fisheries issue, whereas the Spokane Tribe was unable to include that. And that's the piece of the equitable compensation.
But are those Bureau of Rec issues, the law enforcement and the claim issue?
The claim issue is from the Department of Justice's perspective, the legal claim issue.
So does the Bureau of Reclamation, are they satisfied with the legislation as it relates to the Lake Roosevelt Reservoir?
Except the law enforcement aspect of it.
Okay. Okay. And then back to this issue, the second issue that you're raising. Do you see any difference between the damage to the Spokane Reservation, to its way of life, and the damage that was done to the Colville Tribe? Do you see any difference in the damage? No. No? Okay, so the damage was the same. And the fact that the Colville received a settlement in 1994 for the exact same harm, they lost access to salmon and land and burial sites and all sorts of things. That settlement, my understanding is, had the Department of Justice support, despite the assertion that the tribe had no legal claim, a position that it had argued for many years. Is that correct?
My understanding, and it was included in the 2000 GAO report, that Colville actually was able to amend its underlying Indian Claims Commission filing, and it did include the fisheries as well as the hydropower value, whereas the Spokane were seeking an outside the legal ICC claims and were unable to amend their underlying claim to include that. That was my understanding of the basis of the Colville settlement in the mid-90s.
So you're saying that the technicality of how they reached the agreement and what it was called at the time, the Department of Justice basically was supporting the agreement because of the structure?
I think because of that history that there was less objection to that.
Well, they either objected that they had no legal claim or they did. So I'm just trying to understand. Do you think the Department of Justice objected to the settlement? Because they didn't object to it. So I'm trying to understand, if they didn't object to it, what are they saying about the fact that that Colville had no legal claim?
Actually, Senator, I think they did have a legal claim, the Colville, because they were able to amend their original ICC claim to include the two things that Spokane unfortunately did not get to amend their underlying claim to include.
Well, I appreciate that you at least have testified today that the damage done to both is exactly the same. So at least thank you for that. I don't have any more questions. I'll have questions for the Spokane Tribe when they're before us, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any further?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just had one last question for Mr. Labrador. In your testimony, you say that the department would examine other ways that tribes and Congress could, avenues for concerns of the Spokane. What were you thinking?
In the discussions in the department, I think the idea was, at least from a policy perspective, the one that I have was to seek some type of measure of justice or compensation for the Spokane, just like the Colville did, without running into the issues that are listed. We're committed to sitting down and working with your office and the Spokane Tribe and trying to resolve those issues so that they have their share of the equitable settlement.
And are you saying that that's something that is done legislatively or not done legislatively, or?
It'd still be accomplished legislatively, but we would just work on the language so that we alleviated these concerns to get to where I think you and the Spokane people would like to be.
Because you think the word claim sets a precedent?
The legal team who has reviewed it believes that there's no legal claim and the filing was not made at the right time.
Even though they thought the same thing on the substance of the call bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got the answer I needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further? Let me call on Senator Cantwell for her question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that. I appreciate Chairman Abrahamson. Good to have you here, and your testimony is much appreciated. Can you explain? We heard from the BIA earlier about the filing of claims, and could you explain where the Spokane Tribe was in 1951 when this deadline was supposed to have transpired?
Yes, thank you, Senator. We, at that time, our tribe was just splitting. The Coulee tribe was over the Spokane Tribe, our agencies at that time, because of the ruralness of where we were at. Their agency was there, and we just moved away from the Coulee agency and was establishing our own reservation, and we didn't have our lawyers or anybody intact at that time. Our government was just being formed there.
So they're penalizing you not because you weren't impacted, but because the fact that you weren't properly formed at the time?
Yes, at that time, and the government at that time should have recognized and brought it up to our leadership at that time to file something, or to at least acknowledge that the tribe should do something with that body of water there.
And that was 16 days before the filing? I mean, we're talking about a small period of time, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned fair and honorable dealing standards of the ICCA.
Yes, we recognize that we don't have a legal claim and that this is just a moral claim. And it's when it was done by a colloquy, when the 1994 legislation was done, and Senator Inouye, Senator Murray, Senator Bradley, and Senator McCain was four of them that did a colloquy to deal with the Spokane Tribe fairly during that legislation.
And is that your understanding of what the Department of Interior was also saying today, that they believe that there should be an equitable settlement?
We would hope that's what the intent was, but our people have been coming back here since the 1940s. We had a delegation of leadership that came back, and that was just when the war happened, and they told our delegation and leadership that we have a war to fight, we will deal with you later. That has been 71 years ago there. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Cantwell.